You know what's strange about people born in the 1990s? They remember a world that no longer exists, not in a vague, nostalgic way, but in a specific, almost eerie way. They remember what it felt like to be genuinely bored, with nowhere to go and no screen to reach for. They remember waiting for a song on the radio or a friend to call the house phone. They are the last generation that had a childhood without smartphones, but came of age in the middle of a digital explosion. Psychologists are calling this the last analog childhood. If you were born between 1990 and 1999, you occupy a space in history that will never be repeated. You aren't quite a millennial, and you're definitely not Gen Z. You are the bridge between two incompatible realities. And that split created a psychology that affects your mental health, your relationships, and how you move through the world in ways you probably don't even recognize. To understand this, we have to look at something called the critical period. Between the ages of 5 and 15, your brain doesn't just store memories, it builds architecture. It carves out the neural pathways that determine how you handle stress, silence, and connection. For 90s babies, that architecture was started in one world and finished in another. You were raised with analog values: presence, privacy, patience. Then, right as your identity was forming, the ground shifted. Technology didn't arrive gradually, it accelerated, and you were forced to adapt while your brain was still setting. What that created is rare: a nervous system that learned to be with itself before it learned to broadcast itself, fluent in digital noise, but carrying a deep hunger for the analog depth that formed you. That tension is real. And once you understand where it comes from, everything about how you think starts to make sense. Here's the first thing nobody tells you about growing up in the 90s. You were trained in something most people today never develop: the ability to sit with nothing. Call it the boredom blueprint. Before smartphones, boredom wasn't a problem to solve. It was a condition to survive. Saturday afternoon with no plans meant 2 hours of staring at the ceiling, reorganizing your CD collection, or inventing a game with whatever was in the backyard. There was no algorithm stepping in the moment stimulation dropped, no infinite scroll waiting in your pocket, just you and the silence, and eventually, your own imagination. Psychologists call this the default mode network. It's the part of your brain that activates when you're not consuming anything. When it's allowed to run, it processes emotions, generates creative ideas, and builds a stable sense of self. For 90s kids, that network got a workout every single day. For generations after, it rarely gets the chance. This is why so many 90s babies feel quietly uncomfortable with constant stimulation, but also quietly uncomfortable without it. You were wired for depth, then rewired for speed, and you carry both. The reason a quiet Sunday morning can feel more restorative than an entire weekend of plans. Your brain remembers what stillness felt like before it became something you had to schedule. The second thing is something researchers call earned patience. You waited for things, not as a virtue, but as a fact of life. You waited for the movie to come out on VHS. You waited for dial-up to connect. You saved for months to buy one CD. Desire didn't lead directly to fulfillment. Time sat in between. And that gap, repeated hundreds of times across childhood, trained your nervous system in something quietly powerful: the ability to tolerate delay without falling apart. Psychologists link this directly to emotional regulation. When the brain learns that wanting something doesn't require having it immediately, it builds what's called frustration tolerance, the capacity to stay calm when things don't move at your pace. Studies consistently show this trait correlates with lower anxiety, stronger relationships, and better long-term decision-making. You didn't learn this in a classroom. You learned it waiting for the credits to roll, and that patience still lives in you, even when the world around you has stopped asking for it. It's one of the quietest strengths you carry, and most people never even notice it's there. But here's where it gets more complicated, and this is the part most people never talk about. Call it the visibility wound. You grew up before the performance, before likes, follower counts, and the quiet pressure to document every moment. Your childhood wasn't watched. It wasn't rated. You could fail a test, have an awkward phase, go through something painful, and it stayed private. It belonged to you. Then, almost overnight, visibility became currency. Social media arrived and rewrote the rules. Suddenly your worth had a number next to it. Your experiences needed an audience to feel real. And you had to adapt to this new economy of attention while still carrying the values of a world that never asked you to perform. Research from the American Psychological Association found that adults who grew up before social media report significantly higher baseline privacy needs than those who didn't. They're not antisocial. They're not behind. They simply formed their identity in a space where being unseen was normal, even safe. This shows up in quiet ways. The discomfort with oversharing, the instinct to keep certain things offline, the feeling that some experiences lose something when they're photographed. That's not nostalgia. That's a nervous system protecting something it learned to value before the world told it otherwise. And here's the deepest part, the part that ties everything together. Call it the bilingual burden. 90s babies didn't just grow up in two worlds. They became fluent in both, and fluency has a cost. When you speak two languages, you're never fully at home in either one. You translate constantly between the analog instincts that formed you and the digital demands that surround you, between the version of yourself that needed silence and the version that learned to perform. Psychologists call this code switching, the cognitive and emotional labor of shifting between two different modes of being. It's exhausting in ways that are hard to name. Not dramatic exhaustion, quiet exhaustion. The kind that builds slowly and shows up as a vague sense that you're always slightly out of sync with the world around you. But here's the reframe. That bilingualism isn't a flaw. It's a rare form of emotional intelligence. You understand what it means to be present without performing. You know the difference between connection and visibility. You remember what it felt like to want something without immediately having it. In a world that has largely forgotten those things, you carry them. And maybe that's the most important thing to understand about people born in the 1990s. They aren't stuck between two worlds. They were built by both. The boredom that felt like punishment was actually training. The waiting that felt like deprivation was building something most people never develop. The privacy that felt ordinary was quietly forming an identity that didn't need an audience to feel real. You are not behind. You're not out of place. You are the product of a transition the human nervous system had never experienced before, and you came out the other side fluent in both languages. That's not a burden. That's a rare kind of depth, and the world needs more of it than it knows.